ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहैः तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। So, Jai Gurudev, yesterday we stopped at verse number 4. Just taking a little bit of a recap. Physical pain or sorrow. So, the 14th verse was Matra sparshastu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkadaha agama payino nityaha tam stitikshasva bharata. So, O son of Kunti, the contacts of the sense organs with the sensory world, which give rise to cold and heat, pleasure and pain, which have the nature of coming and going, are not constant. Endure them, O descendant of Bharata. Yesterday we repeated this whole thing once again. So, physical pain or sorrow. If death is said to be incapable of causing you sorrow, where does that leave all of the other situations that seem to make you unhappy? The world can cause you some physical pain because the physical body belongs to the physical world. One physical entity can therefore hurt another. Arjuna's problem is not physical, it is purely sorrow, shoka. And shoka is a type of thinking. While physical pain is something to be endured and cured, sorrow is something you build on. Physical pain is not something that is totally avoidable. The body is subject to pain and will be affected by one force or the other. The sun, rain, winter, and so on. You can protect the body to the extent possible, but because it is anitya, constantly changing, it is subject to pain. This is the nature of the body. Sorrow, on the other hand, is something you build onto the pain because of a particular way of thinking. This is exactly where we have to change cognitively. Therefore, Krishna said, take every situation as it comes, Arjuna, cheerfully in your stride with a sense of humor. Krishna later told Arjuna how these opposites cannot really do anything to you because by nature they have no independent existence apart from yourself, the Atma. There is some kind of lumping that occurs due to a confusion between orders of reality. The mind, senses, and body have similar realities, whereas the Atma is of another order of reality. When you say you are sad, you involve the Atma, I, in the sadness, as though the Atma belongs to the same order of reality as the mind, which it does not. In this way, the Atma is taken to be the Anatma and it becomes one among the many. Because the Anatmas in the world are too many and so varied, you cannot cope with them all. Even though they are all anatma. Even the small bugs create so many problems, let alone the more powerful forces. If the Atma is really one among the many, nothing can be done. However, the vision is that the Atma is unlike any of them. Sorrow is not possible without Atma I. Every time there is sorrow, it is because Atma is somehow involved. Mere mind with its thought processes cannot create sorrow. Therefore, ignorance is the cause for imputing sorrow to Atma. What is there to worry about? The coming and going of the opposites is a fact. Thus, when Krishna told Arjuna, endure them, titikshasva, he was not offering advice, he was being objective. What is the need for this objectivity? Because situations are constantly changing, the pleasant as well as the unpleasant. To think that only the pleasant ones change and not the unpleasant is not correct. What then is there to worry about? For a person who is objective, who has a certain appreciation for what the world and its situations are all about, there is no reason for sorrow. There are just situations to face and act upon, whether inner or outer. There is nothing to be sad about. So, moving forward, further he said, Yam hi na vyathayantyete purusham purusharshapha samadukha sukham dhiram somritatvaya kalpate. Purusha Rishabha, O the prominent among men, Arjuna, Ete, these two, Sukha and Dukkha, Sama Dukkha Sukham, the one who is same in pleasure and pain, Dhiram, one who is discriminating, Yam Purusham, the person whom Na Vyathayanti, do not affect, Saha, he, indeed, Amrit Tattvaya, for gaining liberation, moksha, kalpate, is fit. Purusha Rishabha, ete samadukha sukham dhiram yam purusham na vyathayanti sahahi amritatvaya kalpate. O Arjuna, the prominent among men, the person whom these sukha and dukkha do not affect, who is the same in pleasure and pain, and who is discriminative, is fit for gaining liberation. In this verse, Krishna addresses Arjuna as a Purusha Rishabha, whose literal meaning is a bull, Rishabha among men. Among large herds of cattle, the stud bull always stands out because of its size and big hump on its back. Just as a bull cannot be missed among hundreds of cows, so too Arjuna stood out as the most exalted of men. Even those who did not know who Arjuna was would have acknowledged him because of his brilliance, Tejas. He was a man of great accomplishment and a highly recognized person in the society. So he was addressed as Purusha Rishabha, the most prominent among men. A discriminative person remains the same with reference to the opposites. Pleasant and unpleasant situations do not affect the person. Such a person is aware of their coming and going, of their constantly changing nature. In the Bhashya, Shankara makes it clear that this is not just a matter of practicality. A wise person knows himself as Atma, one who cannot be affected by any situation. Such a person is called Dhira, meaning one who is discriminating, one who has knowledge of the Nitya Atma. The word Pandita, used in an earlier verse, is replaced here by the word Dhira, meaning one who is not affected by the opposites and who therefore gains moksha amritatva. Mritatva means being subject to mortality, whereas amritatva is to be free from mortality. Knowing the Atma as the one that is Nitya, the wise gain moksha. One who is discriminative, who accepts situations happily, and who does not allow himself or herself to be swayed by either pleasant or unpleasant situations, is one who is fit for self knowledge or who already has this knowledge. Krishna obviously wanted to make this fact clear at the outset. So before we proceed to the verse 16, let's do Manana of what we've just done, 14 and 15. So in verse 13, 11, 12, 13, Krishna was talking about the nature of the Atma. He talked about there was never a time, he said, Arjuna, you are grieving for no reason. There is no need to grieve for those that are dead and gone, and there's no reason for you to grieve for those who are still living. Why? Because there was never a time that I or you were not there. We always existed. It is only the body, like dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. It's just like how the body goes through phases of childhood, youth, and death. Similarly, death is another situation for the soul, for the Atma. So the Atma is eternal. So that is the order of reality of the Atma. Whereas when you come to the body, mind, senses, the reality is different. That is matra sparshastu kaunteya. So whenever there is a contact of the sense organs with the sense objects, the pairs of opposites take shape. Either joy, sorrow, heat, cold, all the different pairs of opposites. But that is the order of reality of the physical world. So, therefore, pain is inevitable for the body because it belongs to the physical world. But sorrow is something that is superimposed. Sorrow is a way of thinking. And what we do is we confuse the Atma to be the Anatma. When we say, I am sad, without the Atma, there is no sorrow. We link this Atma to the Anatma, and that is out of ignorance. Which is why what we need to do is face the situations of the world. There are only situations to face and act. There is no need to be sad because you objectively look at them. Pleasant things come and go, unpleasant things come and go. Nothing remains forever. And why is this knowledge important? It is because this is an eligibility for you to know Amritatva, to gain that moksha. A person who is a dhira, who is stable irrespective of the situations, whether it's favorable or unfavorable. So either dhira is one who has already gained this knowledge of Atma, or the person who is fit for this knowledge, fit to gain this knowledge. So that becomes step number one. Anybody else wants to share? So we move on. नासतो विद्यते भावो न भावो विद्यते सतः उभयोरपि दृष्टोऽन्तः त्वनयोस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः. Asataha, for the unreal, mithya, bhavaha, being, na vidyate, is not there. Sataha, for the real, api, also, abhavaha, non-being or absence, na vidyate, is not there. Ubhayoho anayoho, of these two, the sat and asat, antaha, the ultimate truth, tattva-darshibihi, by the knowers of the truth, tu indeed drishtaha, is seen. असतः भावः न विद्यते, सतः अपि अभावः न विद्यते, उभयोः अनयोः अन्तः तत्त्वदर्शिभिः तु दृष्टः. For the unreal, mithya, there is never any being. For the real, there is never any non-being. The ultimate truth of both of these is seen by the knowers of the truth. This is a very important verse, even though cryptic. For the asat, a word we shall use as it is, there is no being, bhava. In other words, being is not there for the asat. And for the sat, there is no non being. In the second line of the verse, Krishna went on to say that this fact is known by those people who know the ultimate truth about sat and asat. The first line is the crux of the verse. Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. Asat means something that does not exist independently, and sat is what exists independent of anything else. What is it that exists independently? Cold and heat, for example, do not exist independently because they depend upon a number of factors. There is no absolute cold existing by itself. That something is cold depends upon something else. The temperature cannot reveal itself to you by itself unless you have a perception. Therefore, your perception is essential in order to understand that something is cold and something else is not, is hot. When you say this is a pot, does the word pot reveal an object that exists by itself? Or does the object indicated by the word pot depend for its existence upon something else? If it depends on something else, clay, because of which the pot is there and unto which it will go back, that clay becomes the cause, karana, for the pot. The word pot has no real object outside of the word itself. It has no existence apart from clay. that which has a cause, that which depends upon something for its existence, that which does not independently exist is called asat. This explanation is from the Chandogya Upanishad, where in one particular sentence it is said that before this creation there was only one thing, the Sat Vastu, which was non dual, one without a second, undifferentiated. Nothing else was there. From that Sat Vastu alone, called Brahman, everything has come and is non separate from it. Nothing exists apart from that Sat. This knowledge was revealed in this Upanishad to Shvetaketu, who had been sent by his father to a Gurukula at the age of 12. He returned at the age of 24, very proud of his accomplishments, having studied the Vedas for 12 years. Shvetaketu's father was a great man. He could not stand his son's arrogance. So he asked his son, "Did you ask your teacher for that knowledge, gaining which everything is known?" The boy replied that he did not think his teacher knew this. Later, he asked his father if there was such a knowledge, and he said, "How can you know one thing and thereby know everything else? If there is such a knowledge, please teach me, O Lord." The same topic is discussed in the Mundakopanishad. The only difference there the student asked this question to the teacher, whereas in the Chandogya Upanishad, the father asked Shvetaketu, who said he didn't know. Then Shvetaketu asked his father to teach him. Shankara explains Asat further. When we try to prove the existence of things that are dependent upon causes for their existence, such as cold and heat or any given object, we find that there is no self existent thing at all among the objects of the world. Why? Because what is there is only a form, vikara, that keeps changing, vyabhicharati. It is never the same, nor can it be the same. Shankara goes on to prove a point here. Suppose all pots are made of clay, but you have knowledge of only one pot. You know it is clay. If you know Satya, the truth, the cause Karana of all pots to be non dual clay, regardless of what form any or all pots assume, you know that they are nothing but this one clay. By knowing that one clay, you know all pots in the sense that they are not separate from the clay. Although this is a general knowledge, samanya jnana of all pots as clay, and not the particular knowledge, vishesha jnana of individual pots, it is knowledge of the whole. Then, what is a pot? It is purely a name for a form. Other than this, there is no pot that exists separate from clay. Nor is the clay the pot. If it were, again, you would not need to make the pot, the clay being there already. Therefore, the clay is not the pot. If you remove the clay, where is the pot? Is it anywhere? Is it something that you have to search for? No. All that there is for the name pot is a form recognized as such. Anything that is time bound, like a pot, will change, and you cannot stop it because its nature is to keep on changing. When and how are you going to stop it? Therefore, what are you crying for? What are you sad for? Are you sad for something eternal because it is eternal? No. Sat is that which never changes. It has no non existence, abhava at all. Sat is never negated at any time, whereas Asat never enjoys a being of its own. Therefore, Sat cannot create any sorrow for you, and Asat is incapable of doing so because it does not exist in its own right. How can Asat create sorrow? In the vision of the Veda, you are the Sat, and everything else is Asat. Asat cannot be a source of sorrow to Sat, and Sat cannot be a source of sorrow to you because it is you. It is you. The whole problem is one of confusion between Sat and Asat, between Atma and Anatma. Asat has no being, no bhava. It has no existence. Thus, it cannot be bhava, that which exists in all three periods of time. A thing that exists is bhava, and abhava is a thing that does not exist.
Can
The
you
word
complete it?
bhava comes from the root bhu, used in the sense of existence.
How how can Asad create sorrow? That para.
So, in the vision of the Veda, how can Asat create sorrow? In the vision of the Veda, you are the Sat and everything else is Asat. Say Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. Right? That is what the Veda tells us. Asat cannot be a source of sorrow to Sat. And Sat cannot be a source of sorrow to you because it is you. The whole problem is one of confusion between Sat and Asat, between Atma and Anatma. Asat has no being, no bhava. It has no existence. Thus, it cannot be bhava, that which exists in all three periods of time. A thing that exists is bhava, and abhava is a thing that does not exist. The word bhava comes from the root bhu, used in the sense of existence. Before we go to the next paragraph, we'll just recap this one so that we get the gist of what Swamiji and
Even
Shankaracharya.
for Mandukya and Chandogya Upanishad, what did he compare there? The question what is asked in Chandogya and Mandukya?
Yeah, Chandogya and Mundaka Upanishad. The thing was, what is that knowledge knowing which you know everything else? So, nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satah. Ubhayorapi drishtontah tvanayos tattvadarshibhi. So, asat has no real existence, has no being, and sat has no non being, which means sat is existent throughout. So, what is asat? Asat is anything that depends on something else for its existence. That is the definition of asat, like cold and heat. Cold, you cannot have absolute cold because, in order to say cold, you need some person to experience that cold and then give a judgment, yes, this is cold. So, you need the existence of your skin, you need the existence of a mind that perceives that temperature, and then you say this is cold or hot. which
So he
means
said,
if this
hmm,
person is not there, if there's no sense, if there's no sense organ, no mind, then the cold does not exist. So truth is something that has to exist in all periods of time. When you look at a living person to a dead person has no sense of being, has no sense of touch. So then the cold is relative, it is changing, it is dependent, and its existence depends upon something else. It's dependent. Whereas Sat is something that exists in all three states, in all periods of time. It is timeless. And that is
so
what,
Asat depends upon Sat.
yeah, Asat depends upon Sat. Sat exists independently.
Hmm.
Like the example given, Swamiji gave the example of the pot and clay. The word pot has no independent existence apart from clay. But clay is not the pot. Sat, although Asat depends upon Sat, Sat Vastu is the only thing that exists, and that is whole. So he says clay is not the pot, but pot is not apart from the clay.
But the clay is a Karana. So how we can say the Satya for pot is a clay? Because without clay, pot cannot remain, means exist.
Yeah. So were you making a statement or was there a question in what you said?
I was asking a question. Clay doesn't pot doesn't depend without the existence of clay, and clay is a Karana. So clay is a Satya for pot. Is it that?
Yeah, yeah. That is what it is,
Hmm.
no?
So
So,
that is Satya for pot. Yeah. Okay. But Karana, he is saying, so I got confused between the Satya and Karana. So for every any being, what is Satya, Chetna, that Atma?
I think here the analogy is only just given. Actually, for the pot and clay and for everything, whatever we experience through five senses, for everything, everything is asatya only as far as from the reference point of consciousness. But something we need know at the level of the mind intellect to understand. So analogy of that Dvait understanding of pot and clay. That is why there it is the karana. But from the absolute point, everything is asatya except the consciousness. That's what I understand. Jai Guru.
yeah, this is only to give an example of the substrat of the fact that Asat depends upon Sat. Just like how in yesterday's Kenopanishad, the spider makes the web out of its own. It does not look for another material from outside. Similarly, the whole creation is come out of Brahman himself. So therefore, he is permeating in and through. So the whole world is dependent upon Brahman.
Correct. Thank you.
So the world is dependent on Brahman. Anatma is dependent on Atma. Atma exists independent of Anatma. which is why if we remember, if we go back to the chapter 9, I am in them, they are not in me. That becomes clearer now. So, Shankara explains Asat further. When we try to prove the existence of things that are dependent upon causes for their existence, such as cold and heat or any given object, we find that there is no self existent thing at all among the objects of the world. Why? Because what is there is only a form, vikara, that keeps changing. Vyabhicharati. It is never the same, nor can it be the same. See, here, if we list out all the things that keep changing, what are all those things that keep changing? When you look at the outside world, the seasons change, time, day, night changes. When you start looking inward, your the body changes. Grossly, we look at the body going through infancy, childhood, youth, and adult and old age. But constantly, moment to moment, there is a change happening in the body. The mind changes. We are not the same all the time. There are times when we are happy, there are times we are not so happy. Emotions change. Our intellect, the judgments we make, opinions we make of others changes. The ego changes. Sometimes it's very happy and elated because someone has praised us, and sometimes it becomes very sad because someone has humiliated us. So, all these things that are changing are non existent by definition. Because what is that? That existence, I will come to that, I think, in the next paragraph. Existence is that which remains unaffected by time. It is the same in all states. So, again, going by what Shvetaketu's father asked him in Chandogya Upanishad, did your teacher teach you that knowledge? Did you know that? Did you learn that knowledge, knowing which you know everything else? He says, no, my teacher did not know. So please teach me. And he asks his father. So Shankara goes on to prove a point. Supposing all pots are made of clay, but you have knowledge of only one pot, you know it is clay. If you know Satya, the truth, the cause, Karana, of all pots to be non dual clay, regardless of what form any or all pots assume, you know that they are nothing but this one clay. By knowing that one clay, you know all pots in the sense that they are not separate from the clay. So, this is the knowledge. So, when you know the knowledge of Atma, and Atma is what is all pervading, is the Karana for everything else in creation, it is as if you know the whole creation. It is you know the whole creation. Although this is general knowledge, samanya jnana of all pots is clay, and not the particular knowledge, vishesha jnana of individual pots, it is knowledge of the whole. I think we had a doubt some time back when we were reading this thing about how is it that the enlightened person knows everything, is all knowing. It is because of that samanya jnana. He may not have vishesha jnana of, say, how the um, how the atom bomb works, or the specificities, the vishesha jnana, but he has the samanya jnana, the knowledge of the whole. Then what is the pot? It is purely a name for form. Other than this, there is no pot that exists separate from clay. nor is the clay the pot. If it were, again, you would not need to make the pot, the clay being there already. Therefore, the clay is not the pot. If you remove the clay, where is the pot? Is it anywhere? Is it something that you have to search for? No. All that there is, all that is there for the name pot is a form recognized as such. Anything that is time bound like a pot will change, and you cannot stop it because its nature is to keep on changing. When and how are you going to stop it? Therefore, what are you crying for? What are you sad for? Are you sad for something eternal because it is eternal? No. I mean, this one paragraph is quite impactful. If we're able to bring this into our awareness in our encounters with the world, no? So much we give importance to others' opinions of us. They're changing. Can you do anything to their changing opinions? We simply become a football of their opinions. Let them. Does not matter. So you cannot do anything about the changing world.
And that opinions are time bound. Time changes, opinion changes.
Opinions happen in the mind. The mind keeps changing. Intellect keeps
Mhm.
changing. And we solidify them. We eternalize them. And that is again because of a wrong way of thinking. That is why Krishna told Arjuna, there are only situations to face. Endure them. Face them cheerfully with a sense of humor. That is what. So, Sat is that which never changes. It has no non existence, abhava at all. Sat is never negated at any time, whereas Asat never enjoys a being of its own. Therefore, Sat cannot create any sorrow for you, and Asat is incapable of doing so because it does not exist in its own right. How come Sat cannot cause sorrow for you? Because it is you, right?
Because Asat
Asat,
cannot exist without Sat. And you are Sat.
yeah, but how come Sat doesn't cause sorrow? I think we saw this in the previous two verses there. How Sat, how there is no basis for
Wrong
sorrow.
knowing. Hmm. What Sat is, we feel it as Asat, and then the sorrow comes.
Yeah. The only thing is the confusion. See, Sat is something which is whole, which is the only thing that exists. So, in order to create sorrow, there has to be something else. But when there is no something else, how is Sat? Sat, you are Sat and you are Purna, you are whole. So, where is the question of sorrow? So, how can Asat create sorrow in the vision of the Veda? You are the Sat and everything else is Asat. Asat cannot be a source of sorrow to Sat, and Sat cannot be a source of sorrow to you because it is you. The whole problem is one of confusion between Sat and Asat, between Atma and Anatma. Asat has no being, no bhava, it has no existence. Thus, it cannot be bhava, that which exists in all three periods of time. A thing that exists is bhava, and abhava is a thing that does not exist. The word bhava comes from the root bhu, used in the sense of existence. Analysis of existence and non existence. Tucha is another word for abhava and refers to certain combinations that do not exist at all. For example, man's horn, Manushya Shringa, does not exist. Horn exists and man exists. Both are bhava, both exist. For these words, there are there are objects in the world which I know exist. But when I combine the two as man's horn, there is no such thing. Does the word asat in the verse mean tucha, non existent? No, because it is unnecessary to say that something that is non existent has no being. In some modern commentaries on the Gita, however, we do find asat being translated as and equated to non existent. What purpose is served by the sentence, the non existent, such as the man's horn, has no existence? No purpose is served by the sentence. That which we refer to as asat as an order of reality, which is neither satya, bhava, nor tucha. There is another type of abhava between these two, a non existence that we call asat here. For instance, we cannot dismiss the sense organs and sense objects as totally non existent tucha. Are they then sat? Let us analyze them. So, here the word tucha is another word for abhava. It refers to certain combinations that do not exist at all. The example given here is of a man's horn. Man exists and horn exists, but man's horn, this combination, is non existent. But the word asat here in this verse, does it mean non existent? If it is non existent, then there is no point in saying there is no being for non existent. Anyway, it is non existent. Right? So here, there is an order of reality that there is the sense organs, the sense objects are not totally non existent. That's what Swamiji is saying. We cannot dismiss the sense organs and sense objects as totally non existent tucha. Are they then sat? Let's analyze them. A sense organ cannot be called a sense organ unless it perceives something. Eyes are a sense organ only because they see a form. Ears are a sense organ because they hear a sound. And the senses of smell, taste, and touch are all called sense organs because they contact their sense objects. How can you call eyes a sense organ if they do not see? If ears do not hear, there is no sense organ, even though the ear lobes may be used for hearings or for catching hold of someone. The earlobes, etc., are just the anatomical aspects of the sense called hearing. It is hearing that makes the ears a sense organ, and there is no such thing as sound without the ears. Which establishes what? To establish the existence of one, we need to establish the existence of the other. When establishing the existence of either one, which depends on establishing the existence of the other, there must be some other basis for the existence of both. Thus, all of them depend on something that is self existent called Sat. Because we cannot dismiss the sense organs and their sense objects as non existent, we say they are asat. They are not totally non existent. That is asanta abhava. The sense organs and the sense objects do exist. All the responses of pleasure and pain, sukha, dukkha, exist. You cannot dismiss them as non existent, nor can you take them as independently existent. Therefore, for something that cannot be dismissed as non existent, tuchha, and cannot be taken as independently existent, sat, we have to have a word, and that word is asat. Another word for asat is mithya. Asat or mithya is that which has no bhava, that which depends upon sat. Only when there is sat is asat possible. Therefore, mithya or asat is something whose existence depends upon another thing. And because it has no independent existence, it is not separate from that upon which it depends. Very beautifully, Swamiji has derived how there are three different words. One is sat, asat, and tuchya. Tuchya is non existent. So there is
But that
an
ucha is
element.
in combination.
Yeah, tuchya is the combination. See, the world reality is rare, no? That is that I'm speaking, you are listening. That when we touch heat, there is pain that we perceive. So there is an element of existence in in at the level of the body, mind, and senses. But that the existence of the body, mind, senses depends upon the vastu. So, with relation to that, because it is cannot independently exist, it is called asat.
Then that is mithya, no?
That is
Mithya and
mithya.
right. Tuchya is mithya.
No, tuchya is not mithya. Asat is mithya.
Asat is
Can you
mithya. Okay, okay.
can you
Which is
explain
there,
that?
but I think when the reference point changes, and then whatever is there, the whole world which is existing, when the reference point changes, that is called that
Come,
mithya.
come again? I
Right?
couldn't hear you clearly.
Mithya exists. Mithya is that when the reference point changes. When we are our reference point is absolute, then everything is non-existent. No, like everything is changing with the reference point of absolute. That is the consciousness. Or you
so
can
Yes.
take
mithya
the
is a synonym for that asat. Same
and then
definition.
when the reference point is your body or the five senses, then with reference to that, whatever is unfolded for you, though it is also changing continuously, but for the reference point of your body and senses, that is the truth at this moment of time. If I am cooking something with reference point of my body and senses, this cooking is the truth at this moment. But from absolute standpoint, the whole thing is it doesn't exist because it is changing every moment. Is it that way?
Yeah.
Can you explain that ear and sound example?
See that which we refer to asat has an order of reality, which is neither satya, bhava, nor tuchya. There is another type of abhava between these two, a non existent that we call asat here. For example, we cannot dismiss the sense organs and sense objects as totally non existent. Tucha. Are they then sat? So let's analyze them. A sense organ cannot be called a sense organ unless it perceives something. That is why it's called a sense organ. Eyes are a sense organ only because they see a form. Ears are a sense organ because they hear a sound. And the senses of smell, taste, and touch are all called sense organs because they contact their sense objects. Now, how can you tell? How can you call eyes a sense organ if they do not see? If ears do not hear, there is no sense organ, even though the ear lobes may be used for hearings or for catching hold of someone. It may be anatomically present there, the ear. Structure is there, but the function is not there. So then you cannot call the ear a sense organ. The ear lobes are just the anatomical aspects of what is called hearing. It is hearing that makes the ears a sense organ. And there is no such thing as sound without the ears. Which establishes what? To establish the existence of one, we need to establish the existence of the other. So, in order to establish ears as a sense organ, you need to have sound, isn't it? Only when you have the sound and you are able to hear this, this combination is what makes the ears a sense organ. When establishing the existence of either one, which depends on establishing the existence of the other, there must be some other basis for the existence of both. Thus, all of them depend on something that is self existent called Sat. So, either for the sound and the hearing, or a vision, some sight, some scenery, and the eyes, there has to be something else which is the basis for their existence. See, all that we see is considered the Jagat, right? Whatever the visible world, although there is a part of the Jagat, a huge part of the Jagat that is not visible to the naked eyes. But what we see is what we call the world. So for the world and plus the eyes that see the world, there has to be something else which is the basis. And that basis is Sat. The scenery cannot exist independently. When do you call a scenery a scenery? When you are able to see it, right? And for that, you need the eyes. So, scenery is as though dependent on the eyes. Eyes are dependent on the scenery for their existence.
That objects come in contact with the sense organ. Then
Hmm.
only that.
So, both sense objects and sense organs do not have an independent existence of their own. They are dependent on another, which is nothing but Sat. Thus, all of them depend on something that is self existent called Sat. Because we cannot dismiss the sense organs and their sense objects as non existent, we say they are Asat. So, this is another order of reality. One is Sat, the other is Asat, the third is Tucha, non existent. So, we cannot totally dismiss the body mind sense complex because there is some order of reality that they have. They are not totally non existent. Total non existence becomes Atyanta Abhava. The sense organs and sense objects do exist. All the responses of pleasure and pain, sukha and dukkha, exist. You cannot dismiss them as non existent, nor can you take them as independently existent. So, this is where the knowledge comes. Cognitively, you need to understand that at that order of reality, at the body, mind, sense complex, yes, all that is true, it exists. But The problem is I attach myself, the Atma, I attach to all of that. And that connection is what causes that confusion, confused understanding. The improper understanding is what causes the sorrow. We'll stop here
But
today.
because of the I, this happens, but we attach that I. Only
Yeah,
because of the I Sat it is happening. But we feel that Asat as Sat.
isn't it? Without the Sat, without I, Atma, where is the world? Where are these experiences?
But we feel that is the source of that pain and pleasure. Isn't it?
Yeah, we tie down Atma to being time bound,
Mm.
limited.
Mm.
So we'll do this. Objects do not exist independently. We'll do this tomorrow. Yeah. There's a lot of tarka here, a lot of derivation, how it is so beautifully derived.
Yeah, that pleasant wow.
Mhm. Yeah. Anybody wants to share anything? We close. All right. So just recapping the verse that we did today. Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha, उभयोरपि दृष्टोऽन्तः त्वनयोस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः. And the verse before that was the 15th verse.
Matra sparsha.
No, the 15th was Yam hi na vyathayantye purusham purusharshabha samadukha sukham dhiram somritatvaya kalpate. The eligibility is talking of why why should we um, take these opposites as with that equanimity is because that gives us a person who is a dhira, one who already knows Atma. For him, he's centered. These pairs of opposites do not make a difference. He takes them with that equanimity. Whereas a person, in order to gain moksha, liberation, amritatva, this is a pre-qualification. It makes it fit. It makes him fit for gaining this amritatva. Yeah. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. This is available on YouTube, no?
Yes, it's on YouTube. Yeah.
Please forward that link, no? So quickly I
You
will
just
do.
go to YouTube. Type out my name. You will get the thing.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
I'll post that link. But then I think if you subscribe to that anytime it's live, you will get a notification, or
I
you'll
have
be able to
subscribed
access.
already. I don't know. I need to check.
Then you should be able to access it.
Yeah.
Maybe you should turn on notifications, then you would get it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
Thank
yeah.
Yeah.
It is on YouTube. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jai Gurudev.